My name isn't important, but what is important is that man. I'm a 15-year-old male who became interested in spells at age 13. I've spent the whole time between those ages experimenting with spells. Most turned out to be for summoning, and others were curses. I devoted nearly a month trying to cast a curse on someone I wasn't particularly fond of. It succeeded, but that same night, I saw a man. He was dressed in a pitch-black trench coat and a plague doctor's mask. He was only visible because of a slight glow coming from my charging phone. He didn't say a word, just stood and stared. I tried to ignore him by going to sleep, but the feeling of being watched became stronger. I woke to see him nearly a foot away from my face, breathing heavily. He then stood up and walked through the wall he was facing. That was my only encounter with him until about a month later. I was looking in the mirror after taking a shower. I saw him standing behind me. This time, he spoke.
How do you continue?
I didn't think about answering the question until he demanded me to do so. He yelled angrily.
Answer!
My only response was that I didn't know. I waited to see if he wanted anything else from me. He said nothing. I turned to leave and he was gone. I checked the mirror again and he wasn't there either. Since then, I've perpetually felt like I was being watched. I've seen him on street corners, other seats in school and restaurants, and in the mirror as well. He continues to speak to me, but I never respond. For those getting interested in spellcasting, I would strongly advise against it. Mom, Dad, I'm adopted. My parents ceased their activities. My mother, adorned in a pearl necklace and earrings to match, stood upright. Upon both hands she had word oven mitts and a matching apron. Her teal sundress really did bring out the blue in her eyes. She closed the oven and removed the mitts, revealing perfectly manicured nails. My father sat his pipe on the end table and closed his book. His hair, just a touch of gray, was immaculate as ever. He wore a plaid shirt and a soft tan cardigan. He removed his reading glasses to look me in the face. Almost in unison they said, Why, dear? What makes you say that, son? Before them I stood, pressed khaki pants, tucked-in button-down shirt, and my matching belt and shoes. I felt both at one with and detached from the people before me. I just know. I tried to sound confident, but at the same time, my confidence was lost to pubescence.
Don't be ridiculous.
My father stood in the light of our perfectly lit kitchen. He placed his hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eyes.
You're our boy, and we love you.
I studied the lines on his face, seeking a no, pleading for a lie, but there was none. Sit, dear, my mother interjected, opening the stove. Dinner is almost ready. I sat at our polished wooden table and placed my napkin in my lap, an old habit from etiquette school. I felt my eyes moisten. Are you sure? I was able to ask, staring at the blank place on the table where my food would soon be. My mother placed prepared plates before my father and I. He said a brief grace for the table and began eating the roast and potatoes my mother had so delicately prepared.
Positive,
he said, savoring his bite and wiping his lip. My mother sat with her plate on the other side of the table to my left and took my hand. You're our baby, she said, looking me in the eye and assuring me I was her offspring. Now, let's talk about something else. You haven't said hello to our guest. My eyes and face were wet and red. I stared across the table. The woman before me was tied to her chair. Ropes ran from her throat to her feet, keeping her from any free movement. Across her mouth was tightly wound duct tape, and her head had slumped forward. The only appendage not tied down was her right arm. It was not a kindness extended, but rather unneeded. Her right arm was severed below the shoulder. Blood was still actively pouring from the poor bandaging and soaking her side deep red. Her eyes had rolled back into her head in a loss of consciousness from the extreme pain she had just endured. My parents shared a laugh over it being seasoned so well. I took all this in again and cried out in a whisper, "Please tell me I'm adopted."
I'm going to dig up her corpse and fuck her.
Mike snickered, bathed in blueness shimmering from the computer screen, his desk covered with crumpled candy wrappers. He smiled at the indignation from the loved ones of the dead girl as they responded to his comment. A rush of excitement spread from his chest and tingled his scalp. Yet when he looked at the face of the dead girl, her plain and smiling features reached down and sparked something nearly lost, a faraway whisper begging him to see the totality of life as something more than a quantifiable and sick joke. He grimaced.
Fucking whore.
He clicked away from the page and hunted his next target. He hefted his laptop bag to work, his footsteps clapping over the bridge. Snow drifted over the steam running below, and his breath frosted the surrounding air in great plumes. 3 young women in black walked towards him, their heads bowed. He glanced their way and did a double-take. Through their red-rimmed eyes and haggard expressions, he recognized them to be sisters, and the one in the middle bore the dead girl's face entirely. He watched after them, and then a laugh escaped his lips, brutal in the silence. As one, they faced him. He remained. He wondered what it would feel like to do it face to face, to see the pain in their eyes.
I can't wait to fuck her,
he said. Horror spread over their features, recognition and anger contorting the twins' expression into an indignant mask. Her sisters held her back, whispering as they led her away. The youngest flipped Mike off. He bounced on his toes, unable to suppress the exhilaration thrumming through him. Moistness dampened his underwear, and he savored it. Then laughter hissed behind him. Hands gripped him by the shoulder and tossed him off the bridge. He shouted, tumbled, and splashed into the frigid water. Through his dazed vision, he saw a dark figure standing on the bridge's railing. It spread its arms and jumped. He screamed, shot his hands out, but no impact followed. He sat up, rivers of fire coursing through his limbs, and searched for his assailant. Hurried footsteps pattered on the bridge, and the sisters looked over the railing. Are you? The middle one said. Then they all screamed. Mike gaped at them, went to call out, but his words emerged as a monstrous croak. He tried again, and a vile and cutting language left his throat. The sisters continued to scream and ran off. He stood and stared as his trembling hands turned into leprous claws, and when he saw his reflection and the eldritch face staring back in the shivering dark water, his shriek pierced the heavens and stilled the hearts of all who heard it. Sirens followed, and when they came with their guns, they found it under the bridge, snarling and rocking on its knees. This creature that could no longer be called a man.